There's a specific kind of muscle memory that only works with certain songs. You haven't thought about the lyrics in years, maybe decades, and then the first note hits and your mouth just opens and every single word comes out like you rehearsed it yesterday. If you grew up in the 1970s, you have a small personal library of songs that do exactly that. These aren't just hits, they're embedded. They're part of how you understand music, and honestly, part of how you understand yourself.
I'm tired and thinking cold. I hide in my music.
Today we're counting down 10 of them. Let's go. 10. Hotel California. By the time Hotel California came out, the Eagles were one of the biggest bands on the planet, and they were quietly starting to hate each other for it. The album had been a grinding, expensive, contentious process, and the relationships inside the band were fraying in ways that wouldn't fully surface until years later. But none of that tension is what you feel when you hear those opening guitar notes. What you feel is a mystery. That descending acoustic figure is one of the most patient, unhurried openings in pop music history. It takes its time. It knows you're going nowhere. Don Henley's vocal performance on this track is something people don't talk about enough. He sings it like a man who isn't quite sure if what he's describing actually happened or if he dreamed it. That ambiguity wasn't an accident. The band deliberately left the imagery unresolved. The dark desert highway, the Kalitas, the voices from the corridor, the stabbing of the beast with steelite knives that can't kill it. They wanted listeners to project their own meaning onto the symbols, and that's exactly what happened. Generations of English teachers have assigned essays about this song. Generations of teenagers have felt like it was written specifically for them. Whatever their specific version of being trapped felt like. 9. Bohemian Rhapsody. Every person at the record label told Freddie Mercury this was unreleasable. 6 minutes long, no conventional chorus, a structure that shifted through ballad, mock opera, and hard rock, like it was 3 completely different songs stitched together by someone who had never heard of commercial radio.
Mama, just give it back.
Station programmers had rules, and this broke all of them at once, and didn't seem particularly apologetic about it. Mercury didn't argue with any of them. He just gave an advance copy to a DJ friend named Kenny Everett, who started playing it almost immediately. The listener response was so instant and so overwhelming that the label had no real choice but to get out of the way. The recording itself is staggering in its ambition. The operatic middle section alone contains somewhere in the range of 180 overdubbed vocal tracks, layered across 3 weeks of studio time until Mercury and the band had built something that no existing technology was really designed to handle. The tape was so saturated with overdubs that it was literally wearing thin. They were building a cathedral out of materials that weren't meant to hold that much weight, and somehow it held. The phrase, Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango, is not a line that should be tattooed
Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and light.
into the collective memory of multiple generations, and yet here we are. 8. Stairway to Heaven. Jimmy Page wrote the chord progression in a single night, which is the kind of information that is equal parts inspiring and deeply unfair.
And she's buying a stairway to heaven.
The band had retreated to Headley Grange, a remote and reportedly quite cold country house in Hampshire, to write and record away from any label pressure or commercial expectation. There were no deadlines. There was just a tape machine and 4 musicians and whatever came out. Robert Plant famously wrote most of the lyrics in what he described as an almost involuntary state, like the words were arriving rather than being composed. He has said he surprised himself with what came out. That quality, the sense of something being discovered rather than constructed, is audible in every verse. The song was never released as a single. Radio stations played it anyway, in its entirety, and listeners called in requesting it so frequently that it became the most requested and most played song in FM radio history. That is an extraordinary thing when you consider that the song is nearly 8 minutes long, begins with a 2-minute acoustic introduction, and shifts tempo, key, and emotional register completely before it ends. It shouldn't have worked on the radio. It just did, because the alternative, not playing it, wasn't really an option anyone was willing to live with. 7. Go Your Own Way. The whole premise of recording rumors is one of the more remarkable acts of collective professional discipline in music history.
You can go your own way. Go your way.
2 of the 5 members of the band had just ended a romantic relationship with each other. A third was going through a divorce. A fourth was dissolving a long personal partnership. They were all processing enormous amounts of pain in real time, and they kept showing up to the studio together, day after day, standing in the same room, recording the same album. And what came out of that process was one of the best-selling records ever made. Go Your Own Way is the most direct document of the Buckingham-Nicks breakup, which means it is Lindsey Buckingham's version of events, told without any particular consideration for Stevie Nicks' feelings about being described that way. She hated certain lyrics and made that clear. She asked for changes. He didn't make them. And so the song stayed exactly as he wrote it, raw and accusatory and completely unfiltered, with one of the most driving, urgent, rhythmic arrangements the band ever recorded. Mick Fleetwood's drum pattern was partly inspired by the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, which you can hear if you're listening for it, a kind of barely controlled propulsive energy underneath everything. 6. Dream On. Steven Tyler wrote the core of this melody as a teenager, alone at a piano years before Aerosmith existed as a band. He kept developing it slowly, returning to it, shaping it without any particular deadline or expectation. It was a private thing. When Aerosmith finally recorded it for their debut album, the label didn't think it had any commercial potential at all. Too slow, too different, too long, too operatic for a rock band that was supposed to be in the tradition of the Stones and the Faces. They were right that it was different. They were wrong about what that meant. The song was released as a single and barely charted. That was 1973. Then in 1976, someone had the idea to release it again. This time it cracked the top 10. The song hadn't changed by a single note. What had changed was the audience. 3 years of rock radio had shifted just enough that there was now space for something this ambitious, this patient, this unashamed about its own scale. Tyler's voice climbing from a low, almost conversational register all the way up to that final sustained scream is a physical achievement that people still talk about. It remains one of the most demanding vocal performances in classic rock. 5. Superstition. Stevie Wonder wrote this song for Jeff Beck. That's the version of events that tends to stop people in their tracks the first time they hear it. Because the idea of superstition belonging to anyone other than Stevie Wonder requires a mental adjustment. Beck had worked with Wonder during the Talking Book sessions, and the two had developed a genuine creative rapport. Wonder wrote the track, Beck assumed he'd be recording it, and then Motown suggested that Wonder release his version first as a single. Beck's version came out afterward. It is a perfectly good recording that almost nobody listens to because Wonder had already made the definitive one and there was simply no improvement on it. The clavinet riff that opens the song is one of the most instantly recognizable moments in popular music. It is funky in a way that seems to operate at a neurological level, some combination of rhythm and tone that connects with the body before the brain has processed anything. The drum pattern underneath it, played by Wonder himself, is precise and wild at the same time. The horn arrangement that comes in mid-track is pure Motown architecture, and Wonder's vocal performance is so effortlessly commanding that it's easy to forget how young he was when he recorded it. He was 21 years old, 21, for Don't Stop Me Now. This is one of the most purely joyful recordings in rock history, and it was made by a band in the middle of some significant internal tension. Freddie Mercury was living a life that the other members of Queen had complicated feelings about, and some of those complications were affecting the way they worked together. The song, which is Mercury's explicit and exuberant celebration of that exact life, was not universally embraced by his bandmates in the way it might have been in a simpler situation. Brian May has said he wasn't particularly fond of it at the time. Time has a way of resolving those judgments. The piano performance that Mercury delivers on this track, recorded almost certainly in a single take, is breathtaking in its physicality. He plays like someone who has somewhere extremely important to be and is running slightly late. The tempo is relentless. The key change in the final section, a moment that the casual listener might not even consciously register, elevates the whole thing into something almost dizzyingly alive. 200 degrees, that's why they call me Mr. Fahrenheit. It is an objectively absurd lyric. It is also completely perfect. 3. More than a feeling. Tom Scholz spent years in his basement building a home studio that wasn't supposed to be able to produce a major label album. He built custom amplifiers, custom effects units, and custom recording equipment because the commercial versions didn't give him the sound he was hearing in his head. He worked full-time as a product designer at Polaroid and came home and recorded at night. When Boston's debut album came out in 1976, the guitar sound on it was genuinely unlike anything that had been heard on a mainstream rock record. Clean, enormous, almost symphonic in its scope, and recorded by a man in a basement in Massachusetts who had essentially built his own instrument from scratch. More Than a Feeling opens that album, and the opening chord is one of the great arrivals in rock history. You know it in the first millisecond. The acoustic guitar figure, the drums crashing in, the wall of electric guitar that follows. It's all sequenced for maximum impact, and it hits exactly as intended. Brad Delp's vocal performance sits above all of that production like it was born there, reaching notes that should require effort and seeming to require none. The bridge especially, the moment when the track briefly pulls back before the final chorus, is one of those sequences where you feel the song building under you like a wave. The chord progression became so influential that Kurt Cobain was once asked about Smells Like Teen Spirit and acknowledged that he'd had more than a feeling in the back of his mind. That's the distance this song traveled. From a basement in Massachusetts to the DNA of the next generation of rock. To Layla, Eric Clapton was in love with a woman who was married to his best friend. The woman was Pattie Boyd. The best friend was George Harrison. Clapton pursued her for years, with a combination of devotion and dysfunction that he has since described with considerable candor, and the whole consuming, impossible situation poured directly into the recording of this song. He borrowed the title from a Persian love story about a man who loves a woman he cannot have. The parallel was not subtle, it was also completely earned. The guitar interplay in the main body of the song between Clapton and Duane Allman, who was in the studio for what was supposed to be a guest appearance and ended up staying for much of the album, is some of the most emotionally raw six-string conversation ever committed to tape. Two of the greatest guitarists of their generation, playing music was the only place they could say what they needed to say. And then the song does something no one expected. The piano outro, written and played by keyboard player Jim Gordon, transforms the track completely. What had been a rock song becomes something genuinely orchestral, aching and slow, and impossibly beautiful. It nearly doubles the length of the recording. Nobody questioned it. 1. Born to Run. Bruce Springsteen spent 6 months on this single song. 6 months of rebuilding from scratch, scrapping takes, reconceiving the production, starting over, chasing a sound he could hear clearly in his imagination, but could not get onto tape.
Baby, we were born to run.
His label was running out of patience. His A&R man had gone out on a significant professional limb to sign him, and the pressure of that debt was real and present in every session. Springsteen knew that Born to Run was his last genuine chance at breaking through, and he has said that knowledge was inside every second of the recording. He wasn't performing urgently, he was working from it. The production, when it finally came together, was unlike anything in rock at the time. Springsteen and producer John Landau were reaching for something cinematic, something that sounded bigger than what any single band should be able to produce. The saxophone, played by Clarence Clemons, doesn't just appear in the arrangement, it erupts, like a character arriving at exactly the right moment in a story that needed them. The wall of sound that Phil Spector had invented as a production technique in the early 60s was being rebuilt here into something new, something that had the scale of a movie, but the urgency of a personal confession. These songs don't just live in your memory, they live in your body. The tempo, the key change, the moment the guitar solo starts, all of it is in there, encoded from the first time you heard it and refreshed every time since. That's what the best music does. It doesn't just visit, it stays. Subscribe if you want more of this, and we'll see you in the next one.